Hello and Happy New Year. My name is Lana and welcome to the Schoolhouse for Art Conversations. Here is a space where we get to talk about art and life and everything in between. It is one of my favourite parts of my job, and I really love sharing conversations then here on this space where I get to speak to artists and creatives and learn a little bit about their life, their journey to doing what they do and how they do it. So I am really glad that you guys can join us and listen in now too. Today I have the pleasure of chatting with Louise Cherry. Louise is an Irish artist based in Wicklow. I first came across Louise's work in the Firehouse Bakery, where I was stopped in my tracks and stood there for far too long, or not long enough, admiring her work. And I've been really fortunate then to get to know Louise a little bit better over the last couple of weeks and months when we got in touch. And Louise has very kindly coming to host a workshop with us later in the season. So she's coming in February, and I'm really looking forward to talking to Louise this morning about how she came to being a full-time professional artist and how she does what she does. So I'm really grateful for her time this morning and for sharing a little bit of her story. So let me see if I can get Louise to come on and have a little chat with us today. I hope everyone has had a really nice new year and is well rested and is creative 2023. There's Louise. Hello.
Hello. Hi.
How are you?
I'm very well. How are you?
Good. Yeah, I'm good. It always surprises me how gorgeous the days are after really turbulent weather. So it's really sunny where I am today.
Oh, yeah. It's still windy down in Wicklow.
Yeah, it's really windy, but it's very sunny and bright blue skies, and not what I would have expected after the sort of stormy night.
Yeah, it was pretty windy, wasn't it? Pretty wild.
Yeah. How are you doing today?
Yeah, all good. Got blown away walking to work, but one piece, just sorting that out. Yeah, all good. How are you?
Good. Yeah, good. Surviving this stormy weather. But yeah, we're kind of back in the thick of it with all of our classes and things. So it's busy, but I have all aspirations of taking these Friday mornings to have lovely conversations with people. So thank you for being my first chat of 2023.
Well, you're very welcome. Thank you for asking me.
Yeah, it's been it's been lovely to, and I keep kind of like then seeing you at Source then, and it's funny how when you start making connection with someone, they start showing up more and more in your path. So it's been lovely to get to know you, and thank you for all of the time you've given me. So I guess and a lot of artists are the same, but they don't necessarily set out to be a professional artist from the start. I don't know if it's because it's not the sort of regular job or what you'd expect to go down and do. And it's a very big decision to make when it finally comes to being, actually, I want to do this full time and I want to spend all of my time towards this.
Yeah, it certainly is. Yeah.
So I don't know if you're happy to share with us how you sort of, and I know from talking with you, it wasn't just one transition, it was many transitions that sort of.
Many transitions, yes.
Yeah.
Great.
So how did you get to do what you're doing?
I've taken a very circuitous route to where I am. So, gosh, where do I start? How long have you got? I actually, when I was 18 and I leaving school, I had no idea what I wanted to do. And I ended up moving to London, and I did a degree in business. So I'll keep this short. And I actually then graduated from that and worked in London in pharmaceutical market research. So in the pharmaceutical marketing industry for nearly 10 years. And it was my mum. She said, oh, come home. There was family reasons to come back. And so I ended up moving back to Ireland and taking a break from my work. And I enrolled myself, got accepted on a photography degree in IADT. So I was kind of in my head taking a year out. I'll just do this for a year, see where I go, find my path. So of course ended up finishing that and moved into lecturing very quickly after that. So this is a very quick synopsis of lots of years. So that was the first big change for me. So I moved from, working in, the marketing industry. I was traveling the world, and I had to go back and be a student, and I had to get a job in a restaurant and waiter and people to, fund my way through college. And, so it was difficult, but I suppose if you're dedicated, you just keep going. And it was an amazing years. So I moved very quickly from being a student, because I suppose I was a mature student, so I was really dedicated. I was up at the front of the class, class pet. So I graduated anyway and moved quite quickly into exhibiting my work. So I was exhibiting large scale contemporary photography. So it's really different from what I do now. So in a way, I have been an artist since then. So that's 20 years. And I was then lecturing and exhibiting artwork. That was what I was doing. So in the sense of being a full-time artist, I don't know if anyone's ever a full-time artist. You do, it's a very precarious earning career. You have times where you might have lots of income coming in, and then you have times when just nothing's coming in, and you're thinking, oh my God. So well, for myself anyway, I've always had another income coming in, and mostly it has pretty much all been teaching, but in different forms. So I was lecturing then. And then of course I had another big change. I don't work in photography anymore. So that was another kind of big change. So yeah, it's, how did that come about? So I, moved forward to sort of the birth of my first child. I was still exhibiting, lecturing, and actually desperately trying to finish an MA when she was a baby. So she was actually, I got pregnant with her while I was on my MA, which is not very good planning, but you can't always plan these things. So I struggled through my MA and then deferred it for a couple of years. So when she was 2, I went back and wanted to finish it. So I was lecturing and exhibiting and trying to finish my MA. And then I just kind of came to a point where I just thought, need a break. So I took a break and had my second child. And it was kind of like, how did it all happen? God, it seems really weird. So the recession, actually it was the 2009 recession, and I wasn't working at the time. I had 2 small kids, and I just thought, okay, this is the recession. I really need to find work again. So I set up it's my kitchen. So I had my 2 children. I had a 3-year-old and a 6-month-old in a high chair, and I was teaching art classes to friends' children in my kitchen. And it's funny how things work out. It just built up to this, there was obviously a huge demand for it. I set it up out of pure frustration of watching the art that my child at the time, only one of them was at the time, I just felt it was too directive. There was too much focus on the end product of what the child had to produce, and not much just about letting the children evolve and discover and stuff. So I took that as my premise for my art school with kids. So I had 2 really young kids, and I had stopped my practice. I wasn't practicing as an artist myself, but I was teaching art, and I was surrounded by art, and this grew and grew and grew. And soon I was, as my kids grew older, I was taking older kids. I kept taking older kids as they grew. It was just to work with them. But it was slightly chaotic. But anyway, it all worked out. I had, and I have actually developed an art school because of it. So, which actually now I've subsequently scaled down a bit. So I was really busy with it about 6 or 7 years ago, where I had like classes every afternoon. I'd run camps in the summer with kids of all ages, and it kind of consumed. And you do have to be careful with that as an artist, that if you're teaching, and if you want to be a good teacher, you have to be careful that it doesn't consume your practice. And for a number of years it did slightly consume my practice, but I was juggling motherhood and running a family and earning a living. And I mean, as you say, this jump into being a full-time artist, I wasn't an artist for at least 8 years. And then I did just get to a point where my kids at that stage were 12 and 8, I think. And I just thought, I really need to find my practice again. And it was this big junction of what am I going to do with it? Because it had changed and, evolved over the time. My MA had changed the way I thought about my practice a lot. And I suppose I was leaning less to do photography. I used to work in very large scale photography, and it was very conceptual. It was almost always staged with actors. And so they were kind of like mini films, and they required an awful lot of lugging equipment around to locations and all that sort of stuff, which just didn't really suit me at the time. I've gone on. Sorry, I've waffled.
No, you have no, you haven't at all. I mean, it just shows how I mean, if the end goal is eventually, I want to be creating and I want to be making art, but I have to figure out how I can make that space for you to be able to relax into a creative area, as opposed to worrying, are my children okay? Can we pay the next bill?
And this is always it. You have to have an income, a steady income. We all have an income, but you know what? I don't see that as a bad thing. I think having to earn an income gives you a drive, and you because you absolutely, we can't. Making art can't be a vanity project. Well, for me, it can't be. For me, I wanted it to be the way I earned my living. So I had to make the work I wanted to make, and try and make a living with it. But anyway, so I suppose at that junction, I was trying to decide what my practice was. And at that time, I had been teaching painting to children. I've never been taught to paint. I've done the odd few classes, but I practiced in photography. I did performance art. I did very conceptual kind of contemporary work. So painting wasn't something I had done, but I had this overwhelming desire to paint. And at that stage, I just thought I really need to scratch this itch and just really investigate it. So we were chatting about this before. I had always had an open door studio policy. Unfortunately, I always had a spare room in the house that I could use as my studio. I had this open door policy when my kids were little, that they could come in and sit there, and my daughter would sit and it was always slightly chaotic. I never really got a huge amount done. But when I reached this point in my life, and my eldest was 12 and my youngest was 8, and I said, right, this door is closed now. This door is shut. This is mummy's space. You cannot come in here and touch any of the stuff that I'm working on anymore. And she was devastated. She was 12 at the time, and I'd never closed the door on her. And I think she cried for an afternoon, but she picked herself up very quickly and decided to create a studio in her own bedroom, in her corner, and did her own things. And that was really good for her, I suppose, as well. But it was that point that I had to carve out time, and I had to carve out space. And time is the big thing. Time is the really big thing. And I think I just got to a point where I just said, and I've sacrificed an awful lot in the last 6 years. I mean, I got to a point where I was saying no to coffee, no to lunch, no to walk dates, no to going out, because I just had to study. And my husband would go off to things the weekend with the kids, and they'd say, where's Louise? And she's working, because if you're a parent and you're also trying to earn a living, and then you're trying to carve out an art practice for yourself, you have to commit to that. It's not going to happen unless you commit time. And, I had to treat it as much as I could 9 to 5. Now, it was never 9 to 5. In fact, when I had my first painting exhibition in 2018, people locally, they had no idea that I was painting. And they were just saying things like, where do you find the time? And my husband would laugh, and she would say she finds the time to paint between 3 and 6 in the morning.
Oh, wow. So,
I mean, that was basically what I was doing. And I think partly that was fueled by stress, because I had this exhibition looming, and it was like, oh my God, I have to create this work. So I would get up in the middle of the night and paint. But, I don't do that now, thankfully. I've got a better balance, and I'm able to sort of have a normal working day. But it doesn't just happen. It doesn't happen overnight for anybody. You have to work hard at it, and you have to want it, I suppose, really badly, and need it.
Yeah. And I think because we were talking about finding that balance of, essentially you're starting your own business as well. And with that comes a lot of admin and, I guess, again, those sort of boundaries over your working time and how you structure it. Otherwise, something will give and something will fall off the bandwagon, and you won't get to where you want to be. So, how do
The
you
admin,
manage to balance that, or how do you structure it?
yeah, so the admin is a really tricky one for artists because, I mean, we all know that it's using a completely different side of the brain. And I was saying with you the other day, I'd love to be able to, every year, this is the first year I haven't made this my resolution, but okay, I'm going to do 3 hours painting every morning and 4 hours admin every afternoon. And I just can't do it. And I mean, some people might do it more successfully, and I'm not bad at the admin. I'm pretty good. I have a business degree, which I think has helped. But I find it very hard to switch off my brain. So admin work is something you can do when you're tired and you don't need to think. You can just do it. It's methodical work. But creative work is a completely different energy. And for me, I find it all consuming. It consumes me completely. So, I suppose one example would be I had an exhibition last year in London in June, and I had a huge amount of stress with that because of Brexit, because I had to export and import my work. I don't even want to go into the nightmare it was. And so I had about 4 months to create the show, and I had this, it was like a cat sitting on my shoulder, sticking its claws in. And this was Brexit, that I knew I had to deal with all this stuff. I'd love to say I have an administrator behind the scenes doing it all for me, but I don't. And it was very, anyway, so what I did was I just consumed myself in the studio and painted and painted and painted and painted and painted until these claws got so deep in my shoulder that I thought, okay, I can't ignore the admin anymore. I have to stop the painting. And I got the work to a certain level that I then looked at the admin, which is probably stupid because I got the admin sorted. It wasn't so stressful in the end. I got good help and advice and stuff, but I compartmentalize it. That's how I structure my year. I tend to do months of painting where I bury myself in my studio, and then I have months where I'm kind of sorting out admin and making applications for funding, or applications for exhibitions, or getting ready for maybe Source or something, that you just, and then of course the Christmas period is really busy with sales, so I tend to sort of down tools in the painting and just focus on that. And but everybody has to find their own balance, I suppose, on how it works.
And I think, like you said, there's those two sides of the brain fighting for their, getting their stuff done. But if you and you have to find a flow with both. There's nothing worse than filling out a form and then it's sitting there half done. You're nearly better that you just continue that process. And the same way, if you're in a creative flow and you're making some great art, you kind of have to go with that and give yourself the ability to do it, as opposed to always fighting, thinking I should be doing the other thing right now, until it gets too big and you have to listen.
Yeah. I mean, everybody has to juggle things in their life, but I think when you're juggling creativity and administration, they're just so worlds apart that it is a difficult one to kind of. But unfortunately, I mean, I remember when I was at uni, when I was at art college doing my degree in photography, and I remember one of my tutors saying to us, 80% admin and 20% painting, or 20% working. And I remember thinking at the time, no way, it can't really be that. And I don't know if my life is really 80-20 on that level. I'd probably say it was 40-60, but it is probably, you probably do spend more time doing admin. Because I mean, it's not just the admin, it's all the post, you've finished your collection of work. It's all the kind of things like varnishing it, framing it, all this sort of stuff that has to be done post collection before it's exhibited. That's not actually, physically creating in the studio. And that takes up a lot of time as well.
And it's also then the sales of, you can't, you're not going to just create it. It has to come out. It has to be seen. It has to, reach the right market. How do you handle the selling part of your work? How did that
dance every time I sell a piece?
I know.
Yeah, so I suppose it's a really
when did you realize your work? When did you realize there was a market for your work? When did that happen? When you realized, I want to start selling this now? There's a price to this and a value.
Yeah, well, I was obviously selling work, in my previous artistic career before I painted, and so that was, I knew, I did understand the market a little bit, but the market that I'm in is very different, because I suppose I was in a more conceptual market before, where I would have been funded by galleries and to make work and stuff. And now I suppose my work is more commercial.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I wouldn't say my work is commercial at all. I mean, I think it comes down to, I remember somebody coming up to me at Source this year, actually, and bless her, she was very sweet, and she said, oh, I love painting and I paint watercolors, and I was trying to be encouraging and stuff. And then she said, but I'm going to change now, and I'm going to start painting abstract stuff, a bit like what you do, because that's what sells. Oh. And I just thought, okay, I just had to give her a little bit of advice, and I just said, I don't believe you can go around it that way. Now, lots of artists do. I don't make work because I think it's going to sell. I make work because it's in me. And I think if you make the work that's in you, that has to be made in a process way, your work will be good, and then it will sell because it's good, because it's a bit different. And I suppose that was, I wasn't selling paintings for a number of years while I was creating, and I was just trying to get to a point where I felt my work was good enough to put it out there, that I felt it was interesting enough. I mean, everybody can throw a bit of paint on a canvas and call it abstract painting, but I think abstract painting needs to be a lot more than just paint splashed on a canvas. It really does need to challenge and entice and excite the viewer. And I mean, I even, that sense of excitement when you go into the studio and you think, oh my God, what am I going to do today? Or you've been thinking about it on your walk in, and the canvas has been, you have this dialogue when you develop with your canvases, and they're saying, this is what you need to do today. And I find the more crazy or the more brave I am, the better the work will be. So I'm not really answering your question. When I decided there was a market for it, I suppose people started seeing my work. I mean, in the beginning, it was quite disheartening, if I'm honest, because I was changing to a completely new medium. I didn't have a name for myself in painting. I was in my late 40s. It's like, okay, and I needed to earn a living, but I was determined not to create work that would sell just for the sake of making that work. I was determined to find my own style and create work that was in me, because I knew it was there, I guess. And I remember my husband at one point, when I said, and he's incredibly supportive to me in a creative manner. He works in the creative field, so that's, he understands the process. Mm-hmm. And he said, really, you're going to change to painting? Because I changed so many times, and I just said, just please trust me. And he did, and he had faith in me and stuff. But even now, sometimes we look at it and go, how did that happen? How did you change to be a painter? I suppose, I mean, to go back a long way. Anyway, that answers your question. Sales, how did I know when I had sales? I suppose my work just started getting seen more. I mean, Instagram and Facebook are great. I've kept things really local. I've kept things very much in Wicklow for the time being, and I've sort of moved to Dublin. Okay, I did have an exhibition in London last year, so I was branching out a bit, but I was just sort of building my name, I suppose, down here. But it's more about, for me, it's more about process. It's more about me discovering how I paint. I mean, I overheard somebody say recently when they were looking at new work, they said, very different to her older stuff. I was like really taken aback, because I just thought, well, first of all, I thought, is it different? And I suppose when you look at it, it is different. But I was really surprised that they knew my work. I mean, that's just being stupid. But
no, but it shows, again, just the sort of like how a technique will evolve, and how a practice will evolve, and even maybe your confidence, and
yeah,
that it then starts to show even more on the canvas.
Yeah,
I think there's a great honesty to your work, and I think that's what stopped me in the Firehouse Bakery in Wicklow when I saw your work first. I think exactly like you said, that you're creating something without the sort of sales aspect to it, that it's a really honest, thought-provoking pieces. How when I see your work, they just look like they're honestly put together, as opposed to something very, I don't know what, how to describe what you do. When I saw it anyway, it wasn't very, I guess, there wasn't all those boundaries that you might expect to see in something that was
Well,
on a wall.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Thank you. I mean, I think I love the idea that you stood in front of it and looked at it, because I mean, people come, okay, from a sales point of view, people will say to me, what are the deciding factors of buying an abstract piece of work? You know, should we consider the room and the, you know, the where it's going to go, the colors and stuff? And I mean, primarily, I think you just have to be drawn to a picture. And for me, what I strive to do with my work is that I want people to be intrigued. I want people to look at a painting, an abstract painting, and just think, every time that they look at it, that they're intrigued. Every time they see something new. And I even say to my work, some people will say to me, will you paint me something like that again? That piece is sold. I really like that piece of work. And I don't really work in that way. Like, I'm very cautious about commissions. I'll only take commissions on my terms, because I don't work in that way. And if I was to look, I mean, sometimes I do sit and look at my paintings that I've previously done and just think, how did I do that? And I have to, and there's so many layers in it that I'm kind of trying to look in underneath, and I'm trying to remember. I mean, if I was more organized, I'd take pictures at each stage, but it's just not how I work, because I might have 10 canvases on the go, and I rotate around the room and move from one to the other. So the canvases just evolve over time. But for me, even myself, I need to look at a piece of work and just be intrigued by it. I don't want to be bored by my painting in a year's time. It needs to be multifaceted, multi-layered, multi-dimensional, that it's going to keep even me who created it interested in it. And if I can't do that, then the painting's failed. You know, I haven't. And I don't think a painting's finished until you get to that point where you think, you know, it's always that question, when do you finish a painting? And quite often I'll have to sit with a painting for a long time before I decide it's finished, because I sit with it and think, am I still interested in that piece of work? Is it still lighting my fire? Am I still looking to see how I did something? And if I am, then I think, okay, the painting's finished. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, and it like, every time I see your work, I see something new. It evokes a different maybe emotion depending on how I'm feeling that day, maybe. And I wonder then, you know, what do you, if you're not, you don't replicate the same piece again, but do you have a process that you maybe gear towards? And I saw someone did ask us a question, so I will do my best to get back and ask about that. But do you have a process, or do you have an approach to doing what you do?
Yeah, so process, it's all about process. It's all about process. And it's I mean, to answer, do I have an approach? I mean, I've actually got to a point now after 6 or 7 years of painting that I do have kind of certain collections of work that have been painted in a similar style. And recently I was asked to go back and paint, like, for example, the Perfect Storm series, which was 2018, and somebody wanted, there were 2 of those left actually from the collection, and somebody at Christmas wanted to buy 2, but they wanted a 3rd to go with it. Oh. It was a real challenge for me to go back and try and create a 3rd. And in the end, I said to them, do you know what? I'm going to create 3, so you'll have 5 to choose from. Because, you know, because I just thought that the 2 sort of matched well together as a diptych, and to try and replicate that as a triptych, I didn't know if I was going to be able to do it, you know. And they were the most amazing client, because they just said, take your time. If it's done by Christmas, great. If it's not, we want it to be right, you know. And those are the kind of clients you want. You don't want to be under pressure. But I mean, every artist paints in different ways. I mean, some artists paint incredible still lives and portraits, and they follow a particular detail, and they can work a particular spec. But when you're creating abstract work in a process-led way, I think the unknown is really important. It's really important to me. It's quite frightening as well. And you do, I mean, do I have a process? I mean, I certainly know that I have highs and lows in my creativity. Okay. And, you know, there's times in the last 6 years where I've had lows where I've just thought, I can't do this. This isn't working. These canvases are not coming together. They don't look right. They look awful. How can I call myself an artist? I mean, we all have self-doubt. What I've learned is those lows are really important. And when I get to that point, and I know I get to it, I almost look forward to it now. Sounds a bit odd, but you have this high where you're painting, and then it's like, it's not working. yeah, oh my God, this is just not coming together. This canvas is driving me mad. I can't get these to work. I know that that's a turning point for me. I know when I feel like that, that's the beginning of the light at the end. I know that it's going to come together, and I almost wait for that low now. It's kind of a weird one. But in terms of my painting, like, I think, where do you start, is the big question with a canvas. And I start with putting paint on canvas, and I don't really worry too much about what it looks like. Or, I mean, you saw some work in my studio when you did a studio visit recently, and I said, oh God, don't look at that. It's not finished work, because it looks crazy, and it's by no means a painting. And I don't worry too much about it at that stage, because I know it's not finished. It's layers and layers and layers away of being finished. And I think, for me, the more brave I can be, I think I said this before, the more adventurous I can be, the more experimental I can be, the more interesting my work will be. So I'm always pushing myself to experiment. And this is what I want to do in the workshop that you very kindly encouraged me to give, because I wasn't sure if I was up to it. But I want to help people who have a fledgling art practice, to be brave and to explore things and not worry about the end product, because the end product will come if you work in a process way. I mean, I think I have to believe that, and I think somebody has to believe that in their work and stop focusing. I mean, yes, it's this difficult situation because we all want to sell. We all want to make a living, and I do need my work to sell, and I want my work to sell. But while you're making it, you have to try and remove the need to sell away so that you can focus on creating the work really, really well. And I think that's really, really important.
And I think then when you are creating the work without the notion of it selling, it means that you're not necessarily looking for that approval as well, which I think can be really distracting from that process, because it's a performance almost, that you want somebody to say, I love this so much, I'm going to spend some of my money on it. But that can be really restrictive then if you want the approval.
There's so much joy in that, when somebody will spend a decent amount of money on a piece of work. I mean, I don't think I'll ever get over the joy of that feeling when somebody, what happens to me a lot, which is just incredible, I get loved ones coming to me in secret wanting to buy a painting for a wife or a daughter or a friend. I get groups of friends that want to buy the people who they know like my work, and there's just so much joy in that it's unbelievable. But I think you're right, the selling has to be taken out of the equation of making. And
my puppy needed to go out for a wee.
Oh.
I knew the time was going to come where he just distracted me. Anyway, I'm sorry. But I think it's like, again, if there's
touch on something you just said while I remember it, because you talked about recognition, and unfortunately, as artists and as in any sort of medium that you work in, whether it's drama or music, we're all looking for recognition in a way, because and unfortunately for an artist who paints and is creating work for selling, quite often that recognition comes with a sale. And I think, to ask me what my resolution this year was, it is to not equate my self-worth to a sale.
Yes. Well,
and I find that hard to do. So in times when I might have lull periods in sales, I'm like, oh my God, nobody likes my work anymore. And it's like, oh, for goodness sake, Louise, cop on. That's not the way it works. But it does take a long time to have that confidence in that, and to not say my work is only good because it sells, because that's not right. It's not.
Have people agreeing on our sort of comment stream here that they fully agree that the acceptance or the reassurance can't come from the sale. And like you said, there's a peak or there's a sort of a process, and that peak while you're doing your work. There's also the same when it comes with sales, that the sales can fly in and then they can fly out, but everything is a tide will come and go. You could just stick with it.
Yeah, you definitely does. I mean, I have times where I mean, this year it was really quiet sales over the summer. And I did think, oh my God, this is not good. And I was comparing my sales to last year. And ironically, I was actually up in sales, but in my head I was down. And then, it did pick up at the end of the year and everything's okay. And my kids, bless them, when they're asking me for a new pair of runners in the summer, I'm like, no, there's no spare cash. And then, they're very cute. They know when I've sold a few paintings. They're like, Mom. But I mean, we all have to live, and we all have to, if you've got kids, especially teenagers, they're expensive, and we do need to earn a living and I mean, I still teach. I mean, I haven't by any means got to a point where I'm giving up teaching, and I don't know if I ever will give up teaching, even if my practice goes stratospheric. Wouldn't that be nice? But I love teaching, and I think I'm painting because I set up an art school to teach painting to children. So I think I touched on that earlier, but didn't go over that. I was teaching painting to children that I never knew how to paint. And I mean, we joke I've worked in teaching for decades now, and you joke that you're only one step ahead of your students, and, I would have times when I was researching how to do a certain technique the night before and then teaching it the next day. I mean, I shouldn't admit that kind of thing, but
no, but I think it's like you said, where sometimes work or trying to teach art and trying to teach people to make art, and sometimes colleges and that can be very conceptual and very descriptive, and people have to do it exactly step by step, as opposed to helping to bring out that emotive side of it and that really innate creativity that are inside most, or everybody.
But that's what's special about teaching kids. I mean, if you had kids or you've taught kids and you watch them at a certain age where they're not conscious that they're being watched, and the freedom in the way that they paint, I get so much inspiration out of that. And maybe you can even see it in my work. I think, it's that classic Picasso phrase where he said he spent half of his life trying to draw like an adult, and then the rest of his life trying to teach himself to paint like a child again. Oh. And you can see it in his work, and I much follow that in my head. I'm trying. So it goes back to the process, and I'm thinking about it now, your question earlier, like sometimes in my studio I'm consciously trying to be unconscious, which is a complete contradiction. So I'm kind of like, I'll do a little dance, I'll put on some loud music, I'll have a coffee, I'll sit and watch. I'm trying to just get to a point where I'm really fluid. Yeah. And it's something that I've been trying to do in some of my work last year, just get this fluency and the fluid of a brush, just to get this freedom. And I actually do it with the kids that I teach. They all think I'm crazy. I call it the wibbly wobbly. We do these exercises before we paint. I hate that, especially if I'm doing technical drawing with them, like teaching them how to do still life or something. Just the stiffness that you can have in your body. And you just need to sort of, it sounds kind of hippyish, but you need to loosen that out. I mean, that's just that's not even a mental thing, that's a physical thing. And I would try and get that with my work, just get to a point where I'm not thinking too much. So I'm consciously trying not to think, which is a complete contradiction, but I find that really important for my work anyway.
It sounds like you're getting yourself into that creative flow that we hear people talking about, that they're trying to just get where the work just comes, and the work, like if someone was writing a book or if someone was writing a piece of music or performing, that they're sort of...
Yeah, and you hear sports people talking about it as well, getting to that point where they're not thinking, they're just doing. And I think if you can get to that point, and that's why sometimes when I look at a collection of work, I think, how did I do that? And then you're kind of like, afterwards trying to sort of scribble notes, and I did this and I did that, and then I think, well, I don't know what I did, because I literally, it's not so much of a trance, but you're just in that fluid creative phase in the studio, and it just happens. Well, it doesn't happen. You work really hard to make it happen, but at the end it just happens.
Yeah, and I think it'll be an amazing gift to share with the adults that will be coming to the Schoolhouse for Art.
Yeah.
Well, I'm really excited. I'm delighted that you said that you would do that with us. I'm a big fan of your work. I'd even try and get to that weekend if my two kids will allow, if my husband will hang around. But
book in now, put it in the calendar.
yeah, exactly. I know. Well, and it is booking up fast, the spaces in that workshop, but I know there are one or two left if anybody's interested in joining. And if anyone wants to see more of your work, you have your website, louisecherry.com. And I had the pleasure of going out to your studio and gallery there the other day and saw the exhibition that you have running at the moment, the Winter Gathering, where you've invited other local artists to exhibit with you. And there's some lovely work. So if anyone is looking to or coming by Wicklow or looking to see more of what you do, I would highly recommend going in to see that. I know that some people are saying that they really like the term the wibbly wobbly. I think they're going to bring that into their own studio. And then the wibbly wobbly. And then I know that there was a question earlier, I'm not sure if they're still here, but someone was asking or saying that their work continues to change and they wonder if that's why they're not selling, because their work is kind of changing each time.
Oh, so, God, your work should always change. I think that should be part of what you do. I mean, that's my opinion. It's not necessarily right or wrong. But I think your work has to always evolve and always change. You don't want it to become stagnant. You want it to be alive. And I think we all know that change keeps it alive in everything. So yeah I would say, sorry, just to answer the last part of that person's question, if they're not selling work, I mean, don't lose heart. I think if you're not selling work, you're not getting your work seen enough, because I'm sure your work good, and it's the challenge. You have to get it out there. You have to. There's no point in making all this lovely work and it's sitting in your studio, nobody's seen it. I mean, this is where Instagram and Facebook are very useful and helpful, but you need to try and get into local art centres, local, open submissions that they do, and just try and get your work seen more. That's what you're doing.
I know, and that's the whole business part of it. And again, just being brave and saying, yes, this is good enough to be seen, and taking all the comments and the feedback and having all those conversations with people that can be very nerve-wracking, especially if you've spent a lot of time on your own, in your own studio by yourself, then all of a sudden coming out with all of the work to share with everybody. We
have to have, so many facets to our personality. We have to be able to cope with long periods of time on our own, talking to the wall, doing our wibbly wobbly exercises, and then we have to be smiles and be able to deal with the public and work a room. I mean, I'm particularly bad at working rooms. They really intimidate me. I hate that expression. Wait for the room to come to me. But we have to have so many facets, strings to our bow, isn't that the expression? But it's a challenge.
And I guess that does come with confidence and everything as well. Sorry, I could have.
So that's, I mean, there is that phrase, we used to hear as kids, you can bring a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. And so, you do have to build up that confidence. You're so right. And then, I've been painting for about 6 years now. Obviously, my practice was different before, but to build up that confidence in myself in painting where I believe in myself, and to not, this goes back to the selling. When somebody comes, so example, you've got an exhibition or you're showing at Source or something, and people are looking at your work, like, you can't be disheartened. There's no accounting for taste. And Source is a really good example, because there's hundreds of artists there, and there's such a diverse range of work. And it's like that classic sort of chocolate box expression. There's something for everybody, and everybody likes different things. People who like the hazelnut swirls are not going to go for the orange creams, and it's the same in art. And you can't, you might get somebody come to your, this happens quite a lot with couples, and this is a challenge I find, because people are looking for something for their house and they're a couple, and one person connects with your work and the other doesn't. And it's a really difficult one, and you can't persuade them to buy something they don't like. You just
of course
can't physically, and you wouldn't want to. And you just have to just say, okay, that person didn't connect with my work, but that doesn't mean it's not good. And I'm just somebody else will connect with it, and you just have to just have the confidence is the big thing.
Yeah. And knowing that the time, that the time does come and it goes, and it all works out. Well, and there's an artist here who joined, Neve O'Connor. She said hello.
Hi, Neve.
She said you're a great painter, and she's delighted to see you here on this chat. But I know we could sit here chatting for hours. And I hope you'll come on and do another live with me another time, because we can go even deeper. But thank you for your time this morning. I really look forward to having you over to the Schoolhouse for your workshop in February. So I think it's the 4th and 5th of February.
That's right.
And it's you can, if anyone's interested, to come along and do the wibbly wobblies with Louise in person. You can go onto our website and learn a little bit more about the workshop, and I'd highly recommend going and visiting Louise's gallery out in Wicklow Town. I know you have the winter gathering there until the end of the month.
That's right.
With the other artists, and you're usually open on Thursdays and Fridays, so do go and check it out. So Louise, thank you so much for your time today, and thanks to all of the people that joined. We had loads of people joining us today, and they can always watch back as well on our page, and we look forward to seeing you soon, Louise. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon. Bye bye.
Okay, bye.
Bye bye.